So I would love to be able to see more people on the lake, build confident divers that are going to have the skills, have the desire to be out there and really kind of taking advantage of the real treasures that are there.
Off Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. The largest group of freshwater lakes on Earth resides in North America. Here, you can find Richard Tessell on a mission to introduce divers to the unique, amazing, and challenging diving offered throughout this massive body of water. Equally, he is on a mission to further his own education and abilities when it comes to the aquatic environment. Midwest underwater explorers, importance of diversified training, rebreathers, overhead environments, community, and much more. Please enjoy. Richard, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on today. It's super early for you. How's your morning going so far?
Good. I'm drinking my tea here, and I didn't have time to make coffee, unfortunately, but yeah, morning is going good. I'm talking to you, man.
Awesome. I was just about to ask if you were a coffee or a tea guy, but
Coffee.
I hear it. I like coffee probably a little bit too much, but I do try to balance it out sometimes and try to drink some tea in the morning, so I'm not just completely dependent upon coffee. No, it's funny. Oddly enough, I woke up this morning. I had another interview, and it was kind of early, and I didn't get my usual coffee fix in the morning, and I felt like my mind was like, I'm not fully aware. Like
it was like an hour and a half interview then too, right?
It was, I think it went pretty well though. Once again, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast, and I'll just jump right in. Yeah. Tell me how and why you became a scuba diver. Tell me about that first breath underwater. Was it, I absolutely love this? Was it, I absolutely hate this? Was it, this is okay? Tell me all about it.
It wasn't something that, so I was nearly 40 by the time I started, but it wasn't for lack of wanting to. I think all my life I grew up going to like the Jersey Shore and surfing in Long Island, and very much a water person. And I think I was also watched Jacques Cousteau when I was a kid, like I guess reruns or something on PBS and things like that. But scuba diving was always something that looked interesting, but it was never something that seemed like an activity that I'd be able to do, right? Because it was mostly, I see it on television and stuff, right? Like,
where are you from originally?
So I grew up, I moved around a fair amount, but I most of my childhood was in the Philadelphia area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Lived in New York City for many, many years as well. Yeah, so anyway, when I was in college, I had the opportunity to take scuba, but there was all these fees associated with it, and I felt bad asking my parents for the money, things like that. And then when I was in my 20s, I was living in Brooklyn with my now ex-wife, who was my fiance at the time, and we had gone on this trip to Mexico and done some snorkeling and absolutely had a blast. And then I went out to a dive shop in Brooklyn and bought us 2 open water classes. And then I presented it to her Christmas morning, and she was like, fuck that, I'm not doing that. And she's like, I'm terrified of that. And so I was really sad, because it was something I wanted to do. And then 14 years or so went by, and I moved all around the world and had a bunch of kids and was ascended the ranks in some big corporation and was making a ton of money, but super stressed. And then 14 years later, I was getting a divorce, and I was like, I need to do something for myself. I need to finally do this. And I went out and signed up for a scuba class. And because I had a business trip going to India, and I was going to be there for a week, and then the week after I'd be in Sydney, and I was like, well, it would be good to have a long weekend in the Maldives and go diving. And so I found myself, in a pool in Des Plaines, Illinois. They showed me mass clearing skills and reg removal, replace, and all this stuff. And then my instructor, this guy, Ralph, good friend of mine, he was just like, okay, now just go swim around. And, I found myself in the middle of this pool breathing and being like, this is just amazing, and I want to do this always. And then shortly thereafter, when I went to do the checkout dives in the Maldives, and you go to the Maldives and you're like, oh my God, this is the shit.
Oh yeah, just spoiled right off the bat.
Yeah. So, well, and unfortunately though, I did those. I wasn't able to finish all the checkout dives because I had to give some time to fly, and so I was only able to do half of them. And then I had to come back to Illinois and do them in what's called Hague Quarry, which is it's a lovely training site. Just you can't see most of it.
Not the Maldives.
Not the Maldives, yeah. So I ended up finishing it there. But to me, I didn't care because I just liked being underwater, and I still find that the case. Like I don't care about visibility. I don't care about how warm it is. I just like being underwater.
I absolutely understand. So I did my first dives in Thailand, did just a discover scuba dive when I was backpacking. I didn't know anything about the scuba diving world, the scuba verse, whatever you want to call it. And
I like that
was
scuba verse.
yeah, when I was living in Texas, literally I was sitting at a bar one day after work, just happy hour drinks, with some coworkers, started chatting with this random guy, telling him about this story that I had this amazing time scuba diving, and he's like, there's diving here, right? And I was like, what? And there's a couple shops, ended up going into one of them, and just kind of started my path. And yeah, it's a big lake in Texas. I don't know if you've been to the Austin, Texas area, but Lake Travis.
I have, but not to Lake Travis. No, I'm aware of it though. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy. There's a thriving scuba diving community, but I had no idea. And we ended up getting zebra mussels. So when I started, there was no zebra mussels in the lake. The visibility was just horrible, absolutely horrible. After the zebra mussels, it definitely got a little bit better. So that was kind of one blessing for the divers, but obviously not good for the lake.
Yeah.
But yeah, and actually, I just have a quick question because I know some people end up, can't remember the proper term for it, where you do training dives and then you go somewhere else to do your
Referral.
Referral.
Yeah.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find that whole experience, and how was the shop's experience with that? Because I know sometimes they like that, sometimes they don't. How did you like that?
To me, I didn't know any better, so it didn't make a difference. But I think it seemed a little complicated because I did all the pool stuff right here locally, and then I got to the Maldives and I sort of showed up at a dive shop and was like, they told me I could dive here, and like they sort of like looked at each other and were like, okay, and they figured something out. But then I didn't finish the checkout dive, so then I had to go back to the original shop in Illinois, and I think I more or less ended up doing everything again. So
Yeah.
it didn't matter though. I had the cool experience, right? So it was fine.
Okay, cool. That's kind of a nice thing though, in a sense, like I'm sure looking back on it, because you got a good variety of what diving could be, right? Like the Maldives, which is, kind of that exotic bucket list destination. Now we're in a lake or a quarry.
Yeah. But like I said, it didn't matter to me, and then I really sort of leaned into it, and I was out there diving in that muddy quarry like every week, and I started getting on that kind of the train of class, right? It was really so I could get more experience and really have the opportunity to dive with somebody, because I think in the early days I really struggled to find a buddy, and I would kind of almost creepily like hang out at the quarry, and I'd see two people diving. I'd be like, "Hey guys, can I dive with you?" And they'd be like, "I guess." And then I was just like, okay, I would just sign up for the next class, and so I have like a stack of these stupid C cards that were really just excuses to dive, right? Because I could dive with the instructor or the other students, right?
Dude, I literally was in the same boat. And it's funny looking back on it now. I mean, I've looked back on it before. Yeah, how literally you're just kind of searching for that dive buddy, searching for somebody that wants to go as much as you. And I'll full on admit, I remember having some dive buddies that I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, am I the bad person? Like this person's going super fast, or they're just, it's like, we get in the water, we lose each other within a few minutes. And I'm like, dude, this is just, so you gotta find that good group of people that you mesh with. And that's pretty hilarious. So tell me about your progression. Like, how were you taken to the skills? Did it kind of come easy to you? Were there some challenges?
Yeah, well, so like I said, I had this so yes, I needed people to dive with, so that was a motivation to take more classes, right? But I also at that time was really gung ho about diving in New Jersey. I knew about shipwrecks that were off the coast of Jersey, World War I and World War II, things that got torpedoed by U-boats and whatnot. And I was super interested in doing that, but all the Jersey boats wanted you to have advanced open water, they wanted you to carry a pony bottle and things like that. So I went to go get advanced open water because of that goal. So I did that. Then I just started taking class after class after class. And some of them were good and some of them were less good. And two things I realized, two like revelations I had around that period of time was like, one, I was asking, is there a better level of training out there that is going to help me progress to where I want to go? Because I sort of feel like I'm taking a lot of classes, but the incremental value that I'm getting from them is not a lot. And then the other thing was I started recognizing in some of my instructors that they weren't doing the kind of dives that I wanted to be doing. And they clearly didn't have the experience in doing those sorts of dives. So I also wanted to be diving on the wrecks in Lake Michigan. Most of the instructors I was learning from, they didn't dive in Lake Michigan. Like they taught wreck classes in the quarry. And to me, that seemed a little strange. So I sought out different instructors. I hooked up with this guy, Myron Sisiak, who runs had a dive shop in Evanston, Illinois for a very long time. And he and his clientele are pretty avid wreck divers. And so I saw him as somebody to learn from, and I did my first rec training with him. And at the same time, I was getting exposed to a lot of media, right? So I was listening to the Great Dive podcast, for example, James and Brando, and I was getting influenced by, some of the DIR sort of mindset that they had. And I was thinking, wow, this is quite interesting, and it kind of shifted how I focused my learning. And then the other one was James Blackman on Divers Ready. So James was, it still does have a very popular YouTube channel. And I reached out to him and I was like, dude, can I just like get some coaching from you or do something? And he was like, sure. And I ended up going down and spending a few days with him and training.
He's in Florida, based in Florida.
He's in Florida, yeah. He's in Miami, yeah. So, and he and I have become very good friends, and I've done a bunch of training with him. We did the sardine run in South Africa together, which was fucking epic.
That's a bucket list one for me. Yeah,
dude, you should do it. He's running a trip next year, so honestly, man, you should get on that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've just seen footage, and I think since the early days when I started, like literally after open water, I saw that and I was like, I need to go do that dive.
It's incredible. It's funny. And so the joke I always have now is like, so I'll be in Florida, like, I'll go to like Key Largo or whatever. And, I'll be diving like the Spiegel Grove and stuff. And we'll be taking the boat out and someone will go, oh, look, a dolphin. And I'm like, dolphin, because the sardine run, it's like these super pods of dolphins. So you see like 3,000 dolphins all at one time. We actually really got to see something crazy, which was we were out there and we were just kind of, looking for bait balls and stuff like that. And all of a sudden there's like thousands of dolphins like freaking out and they were getting pursued and eaten by killer whales.
Oh, no shit.
It was like a safari hunt, right? It was amazing to see. And so naturally, of course, we jumped in the water with them, which was super exciting as well.
That's I don't know if I've seen an orca in the water. I was just like, I don't know. I wasn't in the water. I was on the boat and we just saw it. There was a mother and its baby in Indonesia randomly, and
really?
I guess it's very rare. But there was one we saw, I remember, and I was like, man, I don't know how I would feel about being in the water with an orca, because they're.
I didn't know how I'd feel either.
Just a quick question about that, because I've spoken to some people. I went to a dive show and they were telling me that the diving is a little bit different as opposed to like your regular charter trip, right? So you go out and it's not necessarily like you go to one site, jump in, do your dive, come back out. You're kind of hanging out on the boat, right? Looking for the feeding. So do you just jump in for like the 15, 20 minutes, pop back up? Like how is it going by very quick? Do they hang in the same area for a long time?
So it very much is like expedition diving. So, early in the morning you get up and you get on these ribs, right? And you kind of like race down this river and then kind of fight your way through the surf. And then you're out on the ocean for, easily 8 hours every day.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. And you're in fairly rough conditions. The seas on that part of South Africa are, not tame, right? It's called the wild coast, right? And a lot of the time you're looking for signs of these bait balls. So you'll see these birds sort of diving and you'll see dolphins kind of, doing these kind of maneuvers in the water, and that's like a clue to some action happening. And then you sort of race, and they have spotter planes that are coming overhead, so they'll kind of direct you to stuff. So then, you get to where the action is, and you often don't even have time to don scuba gear, so you're jumping in and you're free diving more or less.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because sometimes by the time you get if you're getting all your gear on, like you'll miss the action, the whale will swim away, things like that, right? So you end up doing more free diving than scuba diving, and I trained doing some free diving, so I was happy to do that. And then like once in a while, if there's a very large bait ball, you do have time to put on scuba gear and get in the water for a more prolonged period of time. But you're not doing like hour-long dives, as you said. Like maybe it's like 15, 20 minutes, and then you're back out and racing around looking for the next thing, right?
During those like 15 minutes, does it seem like forever, or does it go by way too quickly?
I mean, there's so much sensory stuff happening that it feels, like a long time, but it's probably not, right? And
Yeah,
then you're on to
yeah.
the next thing. And sometimes the action is like incredible and you're just kind of going from experience to experience to experience. Other times there's some longer periods where you're just kind of chill and relaxing and kind of like, yeah, I wonder if we'll see any more stuff today. But it is very high adrenaline sort of diving. I mean, it's like nothing else I ever did.
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine.
Yeah,
Oh, that sounds
I
amazing.
really would like to do it again, honestly, but yeah, we'll see. There's
Yeah.
lots of things on the list.
Yeah, I know, right? The list just keeps getting longer and longer. Like I swear, like every other day, there's something. Oh, I need to go do that.
Yeah. I
Um,
know, I know.
so just to bring it back a little bit. So when you were going through and taking a lot of courses, I'm assuming you do like the advanced, the rescue. Were you just taking a lot of specialty courses too, just to kind of see what was out there because it was a class offered, or?
Yeah, it was. I was doing a lot of patty stuff at the time. I really didn't honestly discriminate. I was, one thing I like a lot about diving is like I've done a lot of academics and things like this, and university. But what I like about scuba is I can kind of flex that academic muscle as much as I really want to. So there's lots of books to read. I like read all kinds of stuff on decompression theory and other stuff. But like, so the classes, it was like I didn't care what it was. I just wanted to learn more, and so that was a fun thing. So I wasn't super discriminating about what I took. I just took it, one, because it gave me the opportunity to dive, and the other was to like learn something new, right?
For sure. And kind of like you're saying, you start to build your like your personal community of dive friends because
Yeah.
you connect with certain people a little bit more, and then that class leads to another class or a dive trip or another training or something. So no, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then the GUE community, around that same time when I was kind of doing something different with my educational path is when I kind of came to discover GUE and then ultimately, get involved with the Midwest Underwater Explorers. And so that was also a great group of folks to integrate with and learn from.
Okay, okay. Just a question. So, because something I always like to ask, because I know how it was for me, it wasn't necessarily the easiest process because I'd probably been, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 years I was into diving before I kind of started traveling down that DIR path, learning a little bit more, about fundamental skills, core foundational skills. How did you take to that? Was it like a hard thing for you to get into? Was it pretty easy to, learn the buoyancy, trim, you kind of like the GUE method, right? Like I know a lot of people will go and take fundamentals and I know it's still fundamentals. I know there's like, it just changed the
Yeah, they just
performance
changed it.
diver.
Yeah.
And but it's basically like fundamentals broken down into 3, separate levels. How did you take to that? And even me, like I just took fundamentals last October and I took the course or in 2023, I took the course. Man, this year just flew by, right?
It did. It actually did. Yeah.
But I took the course and I felt, I had a strong skill set going in, and the skills, there were certain things that didn't get me, certain things that did get me, but I felt it was an eye-opening experience. So how was it for you starting to travel down that DIR path?
I had sort of heard things about GUE, like actually most of them weren't super positive, but I'm a pretty open-minded guy in that sense. Like I've often found that when people are negative about something, it's usually because they might be doing something good. And so I sometimes, and maybe it's a little bit maverick in me, I sort of gravitate to that a little bit, just from wanting to see for myself. So I got into fundies. I had some good conversations with Mayor Tanguay and Max Frankel, if you know those guys, and they sort of, they said all the right things. I was really interested in what the promise was for GUE fundamentals. And at the end of the day, I had aspirations to become a tech diver, and wasn't interested in caves yet at that point. Now I'm pretty obsessed. But
funny how it creeps up on you.
It's just like everything I said I wouldn't want to do, like now I do.
Literally. That's so I literally, same story. It wasn't first trip to Mexico, but went down to Mexico to do diving. And it's
great.
like, you hear about the cenotes, right?
Yeah.
Being
You're like,
Texas. Yeah, I'm like, I'll try it.
It's a hole.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll try it and see what it is. I remember literally, because my girlfriend gives me shit all the time. She's like, literally before the trip, you said you would never do cave diving.
I know.
After the trip, I was like, I need to go into the caves.
Yeah. You're like, I'm sad when I'm not in a cave.
Where's the overhead? But just if you don't mind me asking, and because I actually did a whole kind of series, and I still like to ask people that are affiliated, GUE affiliated, because there was a lot of misconceptions that I had going in, kind of like you're saying, you heard a lot of negative stuff. What were some of the negative things that you would hear, and were they disproven? I'm sure that they were disproven, but what was the type of stuff that you would hear?
Yeah, I think, well, the main thing I heard was, they were like the scuba Nazis, and like they were, rigid, and all had to be dressed in the same gear. And like, they don't do any real diving. They just practice all the time, right? Things like that. And I found that not to be true. So my fundies class ended up being with this guy, Danny Riordan, who was fantastic. And I mean, everybody I've encountered has just been, super nice, really cool, loves diving, really eager to teach students very well. And it's something I aspire to teach as well as, well, I don't know if I will be able to, but I with my own students, I really try to impart the same like enthusiasm and the same passion for continual improvement that I see in GUE. And then all the equipment stuff, like that, just I dove in like a dive right wing, I think, when I did it. So it was like those sort of things I just didn't find to be true. But the quality of the training was like really unparalleled. And it was interesting too, because it changed my mindset a lot in terms of how, I was going certification. And then I took fundies and I got a provisional rec pass, right? And it was the first time I really had the experience of like not, knocking it out of the water on the first go, right? And it was interesting because the guy two other people I did it with, one guy had like 50 dives or so. I probably had about 150, 200 dives or something. And then another guy was like a PADI IT or something like that. And we all got recreational provisionals. And, I think for those other two guys, I think they were pretty disappointed. I just got more relentless about making that provisional pass. And it, 2 years later, I had my tech pass. I was doing Cave 1, and it was very rewarding in a way that most scuba classes are not, because I had to work my ass off to get the credential. And I'm really glad I had to I'm glad I got a provisional. I'm glad I needed that extra time to get better. And it was testament to like a different way of learning and a different way of approaching diving, which, I think is fantastic.
Did the other two students, do you know? I don't know if you stayed connected.
I don't know.
Okay.
Not really. I think I might be connected to them, but on Facebook or something. But no, I have no idea if they progressed. I think they did not. I think maybe they were like, that was fun, but no.
You know what's kind of funny, to be honest? Well, I think I kind of had this mindset before I went in there. So I was an active instructor for just about like 2 years. I still am active on paper. I haven't actively taught. I'd like to get back into it. I feel like I say that every other episode. One of these days it'll actually happen, listeners out there. I was a PADI instructor, and one thing that I don't want to say disagreed with, but it was something. And I don't know necessarily where this comes from, but it's almost like when people pay to sign up for that class, in their mind, they're kind of thinking, I'm paying for this certification. Mm-hmm. But you're not. You're paying for training, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I like about GUE is they're very upfront about that. Like, you're paying for training. So going into that course, I had a lot of conversations with the instructor. I'm like, hey, I don't expect to pass. I'm coming in here to learn, right? So if I don't pass, I'm completely fine with that. Yeah. But obviously in the back of your mind, you're like, I want to pass this, right? Like, I want to knock it out of the park, but it doesn't always happen. And I like that approach because it's very upfront. Like, hey, you're paying to train, and we're making you better. If you get a certification at the end of the day, awesome. If not, there's some things that you need to work on, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like
No.
but I think, and maybe that's kind of where the bad, not reviews, I hate to say bad reviews, but kind of the negative comments that you'll hear about it. It's like you go there and you're not expected to get a certification, whereas other courses, it's like, you could essentially, I've seen people argue their way into a certification, it's like this shouldn't be the case,
Doesn't feel as rewarding, I guess, if you argue your way, right?
That's what I mean. But, people pay and they expect something they have this thing in their mind. And so I actually, when I took the class, I just got the rec pass, and I am on, kind of the path to eventually upgrade to the tech pass. To be honest, I don't know how far I'll go down the GUE line. And I think that fundamentals was just something for me to kind of say, it's an achievement, like to me, like in kind of the industry, like, oh, you take your fundamentals, you kind of know where you're at, right? Like, where you are skill wise.
Well, because the standards are pretty well known, and they're it's a really high bar that they set. So yeah, I think it is a little bit of a badge of honor because of the work, right, that you have to do to get there. So
no, it is, and it's they're pretty much the top tier. I don't want to say agency, but they pretty much are, right? So you started taking course, or you're going through your journey. At what point did you know, like, hey, I want to become an instructor. I want to start teaching. I want to create future divers.
Yeah, I had no intention of doing that, by the way. The only reason I even started going down the professional path was because I wanted to crew. So I work as crew on double action dive charters, in here in the Great Lakes. So it's the charter that's owned and operated by Dive Right In Scuba. And so I wanted to crew on the boat, right? And then a buddy of mine has a great boat in Jersey that it's a really fun dive boat. They dive wrecks, and then they're like pulling lobsters and doing all that cool like Jersey diving stuff. And I wanted to crew on those boats, and I was like, I need to be a dive master to do that. So at Dive Right In, I did my dive master course, which was really well done. The course directors there were fabulous. Had a very very well structured program that was really well planned, and gave a good experience for for a student. And then at the end of it, I figured it was going to kind of be the terminal moment in my professional career, and I just go crew on boats and stuff. I had enjoyed kind of supporting some classes during the dive master experience, right? And then the course directors, Kelly and Nancy, came to me, and they were like, hey, you should probably think about becoming an instructor. And I was like, okay. So then I did that. And I actually found I really enjoyed teaching after I, finished it and became an instructor. So I started teaching kind of with some dive shops, and but then I gravitated more towards private instruction. So, following a little bit of what James Blackman does, and really focused on one-on-one, maybe two-on-one personalized training, trying to do, an all-inclusive dive experience, and doing a higher level of education. And I found that to be really enjoyable, both in terms of I know I can put out a great student who has a great time and also is a good diver. And then a lot of these students become good friends too. So, and dive buddies. So I've enjoyed that quite a bit. And I have a little bit of a mission, which is one of the secret reasons why I like to teach is I want to see more people diving on Lake Michigan and experiencing the wrecks that we have here, because we were, me and a couple friends of mine, every year try to go up to the Straits of Mackinac, which is like a fantastic place to go if you want to really experience Great Lakes diving. But we were sort of talking, and I was talking with this guy, Mark Cowan. I don't know if you know Mark. I don't know if he's been on the show, but Mark wrote a great book called Between the Devil and the Deep. Really great guy. He's a journalist. He writes for In Depth. But anyway, he and I were talking, and we were sort of saying that there's probably only like maybe 30 to 40 really active divers that are on the Great Lakes, because we see the same guys on these boats every week, and it's the same people, and it would be great to see more people taking advantage of that, because in the Chicago, Milwaukee area, there's hundreds and hundreds of divers, but they're mostly in quarries and stuff, and I feel like they're really missing out. So I would love to be able to see more people on the lake, build confident divers that are going to have the skills, have the desire to be out there and really kind of taking advantage of the real treasures that are there, because it's not like anywhere else in the world, I don't think, in terms of wreck diving. It's just fantastic.
Oh yeah, no, and to be honest, I've had a few different people from the Great Lakes area on the podcast, and I've told people 100 times, like 100 times over, like, oh, the Great Lakes is actually kind of a bucket list destination for me to go and dive at some
Oh,
point,
dude,
just because,
come up next
yeah.
year, man.
Oh man, I would absolutely love to, and people think like, oh, all these exotic dive destinations. I'm like, I want to go to the Great Lakes. 'Cause
It's
yeah.
amazing.
Are you teaching tech these days? Are you teaching just recreational? What do you do?
So I mostly teach recreational. I do teach like a intro to tech and TDI nitrox, but not any of the quote real tech classes. I probably will at some point. Most of what I'm doing is open water. I teach a lot of rec. I teach dry suit courses and things like this. I'm pretty focused about what I teach. I don't teach all of the specialties. I mean, I can, but I choose not to, because I really am focused on a certain niche of the industry, which is people who want to be diving in the Great Lakes, who want to be wreck diving, who probably have aspirations to be tech divers. I certainly try to bring in elements of my DIR training to people, the things that I think are super important, like the gas planning protocols, and which are sadly like absent from almost all recreation. And it's like, I remember when I learned that stuff, I was like shocked. I was like, how did they let me to dive without really knowing how to plan a dive? So I teach things like that to my students so that they can really plan a dive, that they understand how to manage their gas, they understand minimum gas and things like that. So yeah, so that's what I mostly do.
I absolutely applaud you for doing that. A trend, I don't want to say a trend, but something that I guess maybe I've noticed is when divers start kind of getting into that technical side of things for themselves, they start going into it, and then they start wanting to teach. A lot of them will kind of shy away, and they don't want to teach open water. They don't want to teach those very beginners. They want to teach continuing divers. And a part of me kind of gets that, right? Like I kind of completely understand that. But at the same time, you creating divers right off the bat with a good mindset is such a huge thing. And I feel like that's the type of things that we need to see more. And to be honest, that's kind of the problem that I ran into, is because I know with, my PADI instructor, I crossed over and did an SDI instructor. I know, like, I could go. I mean, this is Southeast Asia. Like, there's a PADI shop every other
every corner.
Yeah, every
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah.
But the problem that I was facing is, I'm like, I don't want to jump into those courses where you're teaching like a family of 7 from.
Oh yeah. No
yeah,
way.
you know what I mean.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah.
That's what I mean. I was like, I don't want to do that. I want those smaller classes. I want to teach more independent. That's kind of hard for me as a foreigner in this part of the world. In the States, it would be absolutely doable, but it's kind of hard to do it out here. I could get in immigration trouble or this or that. So it's kind of hard to find that shop that's like, hey, I would love to teach this, but I'm not going to take the family of 7. I'm not going to take this. That was one of the biggest joys when I was teaching, is introducing people to the underwater world, seeing that eyes light up moment. It's such a wonderful experience. And I mean, that's literally why I start my podcast with the same first question. Tell me about that first breath. I think 99% of my guests remember that first breath.
Of course,
For people, it's life-changing, right?
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
So no, I absolutely applaud you for that.
My company is evolvescubadiving.com, but I do really enjoy that with my private students. I get to spend this extra time with them and really sort of nurture their learning about scuba. And it's cool because afterwards, I've students that are, they text me every day. They're like, did you see this video? Did you see that video? And like, they're like, am I annoying? Am I bothering you too much? And I'm like, no, man, like I love talking about this stuff all day. Like it's great. And I'm so happy that, the bug bit them really hard and that I influenced that. Right.
Oh, that's huge, man. That's so huge. And to be honest, too, that's actually why I'm really excited to see that GUE is kind of doing this big push for recreational diving. Yeah. And because I'll be honest, until I took my fundamentals class, I didn't even know that there was a recreational side to GUE. Like, I had no idea. I thought it was these tech divers going to the furthest reaches of Earth, doing the craziest stuff. I was like, oh, there's a recreational side. So I'm very excited to see that they're pushing that out. Or, I mean, it's been around, but they're promoting it more. They're getting it out there more. And speaking of GUE, can you tell me like how you linked up with the Midwest Explorers and kind of the stuff that they'll do?
Yeah, how did I mean, I'm not, I don't even remember how I hooked up with them, honestly. I mean, so I got to tell you, like, prior to GUE, like, I was really a staunch solo diver, and, I was like really happy just kind of doing my own thing. And like team diving was an aspect that came really hard for me. But once I sort of got integrated into, what it means to be a team diver, I really came to enjoy what that can be like when like everybody's like on the same page and you're like, wow, this is actually great. And then as you progress in your GUE training, you start to see how all of that really comes together. And then you're like, wow, now I really get like all this stuff that I learned in fundies, because it makes a lot of sense when you're dealing with like failures in a cave and stuff like that. So I started diving with those guys. I always had really good experiences, and I think the guys that are leading it are really great. They've really created a very open community. They've really kind of done a lot of great things relative to orchestrating trainings, bringing in instructors. So they had like a Mocha Wagner up here last summer and a bunch of other instructors, and they've consistently been doing that. And then they have a very solid calendar of charters that they're running, which anybody can join, really, going to like really some of the great sites of the Great Lakes region. And then lastly, Project Baseline. So they've initiated a project there, and I've kind of been on the margins of that. I'd like to get more involved, but my schedule's been a little crazy. So the group has just become really vibrant, really active, and the openness around coming into that community is very different from when I first experienced it a couple years ago. It's a very positive environment, and really kind of dedicated to, I think, making better divers in a really cohesive community. So my hat's off to John and Marcus, who are really kind of leading that.
So you can get courses in the community.
Yeah, there's no GUE instructors in the Great Lakes area.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Nope. So everybody's kind of coming in, traveling, and doing courses up here. So I think this summer they're doing fundies, of course. I think there's a Tech 1 course happening as well.
Okay, awesome. And then as far as your personal training, you said you completed Cave 1, is that correct?
So I've done Cave 1 with GUE. I've also done my cave curriculum through NSS CDS with another instructor. So I actually just finished up full cave and stage cave just about a week or so ago.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So I about 2 years ago, I did apprentice, and then I did like a whole shitload of cave dives in between, and then went back and finally did it. But I decided to take Cave 1 also, because I did my NSS CDS training with this guy Ken Salad, who's fantastic, down in Florida, and diving in Florida is very, very different from Mexico.
I've heard.
Yeah, it's a different game. But then I also wanted the Mexico experience, so then I decided, you know what, I'm going to learn GUE protocols too. I'm going to experience what Mexico's like. I'm going to go with, so I went with a Mocha Wagner, who's become a great friend. I've done a lot of diving with her throughout, a lot of the cave systems down there. So yeah, so kind of a two-spear approach to cave diving, which, but I think it's good. And like, that's another thing I would say is like, it's good to change up instructors, right? And it's good to like, learn in different types of environments, and don't be afraid to take a class again. Like if it's going to be a different environment with a different instructor, like, again, it's not about the certification, it's about the learning, right? If you're going to enter different environment, like, hook up with an instructor, get him to coach you or something. I don't think it's a bad idea.
No, that's awesome, and that's actually a thing. Is I do want to make it to Florida at some point. Just say, like you were just saying, the Mexico caves, which I absolutely love.
I mean, they're my favorite. I'll say I like them more than Florida.
That's funny because I was about to ask that question, but I've heard the conditions in Florida will throw you for a different one, and that's so that's a point that I'm like, okay, I need to make it down there just so I kind of have that little bit of experience, and because there's a lot of caves all over the world. I mean, I was excited because I finished with my training. I just completed full cave in Mexico in May, and then I made it back out to Southeast Asia, and there's a gentleman, Robin, who's doing quite a bit of exploring in Indonesia, and there's a lot of little projects going on all over Southeast Asia, but
that's cool.
He's kind of it was really fun going to Indonesia. I was nervous as shit, I'm not gonna lie, just because I left Mexico and basically the whole time I was diving there, I was diving with the shop that I trained with. So, you know, in a sense, I felt like I kind of was under the supervision of the people that I was training, under the influence of the people that was training me.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of that safety net there, right? Like, oh, okay, they know I'm new. And then going out to Indonesia, I'm like, okay, the skills are being put to the test, and went out there. Robin has a phenomenal shop out there. He puts on a really good show, and just absolutely made wonderful memories going out there, and I'm very much looking forward to going back out there. Just a random question, was there any side mount in all of that training, or was it all back mount doubles?
Back mount doubles and everything I've done with GUE, obviously, and also in my stuff in Florida. However, I did for fun this year take a side mount class because
Okay.
I have a friend who's like a real, real, very very much a side mount lover, right? And she's always like, you should do side mount, you'll love it. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a go. So I did a course over the summer in Mexico, and we did some cave diving during it, which exposed me to side mount. I thought it was fun. I really enjoyed it, and I've experimented a bit with it, because I always heard people, oh, you can't dive off of boats with it. So I took it out this summer on Lake Michigan, and it's not great, but it's okay if you know how to do it. It's all right. But no, side mount's cool. I dig it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just kind of curious. So I absolutely agree. I went out on a boat, and it's definitely not the best. And I ended up on that trip because I went, I think it was March of this year. I went and I brought my double setup. I brought my side mount setup, and the goal was to do a bunch of side mount. And then there was just a really choppy day on the boat one day, and flat out, I was like, "This sucks, dude!" Like,
Yeah. Well,
like
that's
I'm
the
not,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not having fun. The next day, back mount doubles. I'm like, this is a
Yeah.
walk in the park. This is so
Yeah.
much nicer. And so I guess it kind of depends. I ended up while I was in Mexico too. I ended up kind of, I think as that natural progression, this was going to be my next question for you. I ended up getting a side mount unit for my rebreather. And is that something that or I don't know, are you currently a rebreather, or is that something that's in the future for you?
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't. In fact, maybe you see it back there. It's disassembled, but it's sitting up there. Yeah. No, rebreather has really become. Man, I love the rebreather.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's great. It's a great way to dive. I gotta tell you, it's pretty awesome. It is. It's I jumped on that bandwagon. I mean, most of what I do is wreck diving, right? So it's a really great tool for the type of diving that's in the Great Lakes. Deeper profiles, and all that. So I jumped on that. I did my CCR training about a year ago.
Oh, okay. How was the training for you? Because I know that'll throw some people for a curve, especially if you've kind of have a longer open circuit background.
Yeah, I mean it's CCR training, like particularly if you've really tried to perfect your open circuit skills, is a great way to beat you down again. And so I mean it is definitely challenging, right? It's I remember so James and so James is also, so he kind of influenced me to go in the direction of the Liberty, which is what I trained on. And I remember one of the very first dives, I'm heading towards a reef, and I'm like thinking I'm gonna be able to match my buoyancy, and instead do a head-on collision to like a and it's just so it's a different animal. But once you start getting it, it feels so damn good, man. It feels so good.
I absolutely agree. I really enjoyed it. So I hate to say it, but so I did my training. It was a little bit longer of gap than expected, but I was expecting to be able to kind of get back in the unit within like a month, two tops. Ended up being a little bit longer than that. So when I got back into it, it was almost kind of like relearning again. And
it was like shit show central.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it was so funny. Well, it's just so funny because you develop. I mean, I had probably a good maybe like 8 years of open circuit diving. I mean, I had these things 8 years just ingrained in me. So going to a rebreather, and it's like, okay, I can't use that tool that I've been using for 8 years. It's like, okay, I can't do that. And it was definitely a little bit of a learning curve. But no, I remember that actually the same thing happened to me when I did the tri dive on a breather. I was getting closer to the coral, and me, I'm just like trying to slow everything down. It's like I'm not doing anything. I'm just sinking into it. And then I'm just, start flailing my hands like there is no tomorrow. And it was a fun journey. I did my training in Mexico, and so I actually at some point would love to get into a back mount unit, but just
Okay.
it's like I need to, I got the unit. Obviously,
Yeah.
they're pretty penny, so I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
they're pretty funny.
I need to put some time on this before I actually just like, oh, let me just go get another unit. Let me go get
Yeah.
another unit. So
Yeah, it's like car collecting. But
it's
no, but it's funny though. I'm so obsessed with rebreathers now that like I want to just like dive all of them and try them all and like have them all. Like I'm fascinated with the technology and I just so love the diving with them. It's just
I mean, well, what's crazy about it is something, and it's almost kind of contradictory, is like something that's so dangerous. If you do it right, it actually ends up being safer, right? Depending on the type of dives you're doing.
I agree. I agree. Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
getting past that point of, and I don't want to say, obviously the going underwater, foreign environment, breathing on a rebreather, there's a lot of factors kind of working against you. But if you can make it work for you and make it work well and learn it and know what you're doing, it's such an amazing tool. Absolutely such an amazing tool.
Yeah, I think the promise of having, if shit hits the fan, not having to worry as much about gas, right, it is kind of a big thing. Yes, you have to deal with the worries about hypercapnia and all these things, right? But those things are manageable, which is cool. And then I think the benefits of the rebreather just, yeah, well
It's
above all
huge.
that. It's huge, yeah.
So do
Yeah.
you have another breather in sights? Like, do you have one that you want to go try next?
No. Well, you know what? I gotta say, I just came back from High Springs, and they were showing me the Halcyon one,
Oh, okay.
the new Symbios one, the
Yes,
chest
yes,
mount, which I never liked the idea of chest mount rebreathers at all. Like it just for me, it didn't seem like something for me. I was much more geared to looking at getting a conversion for the Liberty, the side mount one, that one. But this chest mount, I'll say from Halcyon looks really cool. I mean, it's tiny. It's tiny,
Okay.
and so I have a the DIR set up on my Liberty with the double 7 liter bottles. So it's massive. I mean, the thing, it dives great. It's great, a great design. I love it, but it's fucking heavy, and it's hard to travel with a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah.
So there is an appeal to something that's so small that I could throw in a backpack, and I think it's a very interesting unit, that Halcyon one, and I definitely want to give it a go.
Oh yeah, and I'm not gonna say I'm a Halcyon fanboy, but I definitely think they make an amazing product. Usually, anything that they're putting out, I think
it's
is
good
pretty
quality.
top tier.
Yeah.
Just a random question: compared to the Choptima, is it smaller or bigger than the Choptima?
I mean, I'll be guessing here because I'm not, I feel like it might be smaller.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I think so. It's super compact. I mean, I'll send you a picture later, but I mean, it's pretty small. I mean, you could totally fit it just in like a little backpack. Like you could fit it inside an elementary school backpack, right? Not like a big college one.
Yeah, big backpacker's backpack.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that was a huge thing when I was looking at breathers. Was I'm like being
Travel.
in Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
most of the diving I do is traveling, so I have to get something that I can bring on the plane, and
Yeah.
it kind of steered me away from other units, and there's very popular units out there. I would eventually love to try a JJ. The Revo is kind of on the fence. I know a lot of people will travel with that one, and I was looking at that one at one point in time. When I did my tri dives, it was actually quite nice because I was able to do a back mount unit, I was able to do a chest mount unit, and
that's
then
cool.
a actual side mount unit. So I kind of got the all around course, or just the go around. And the Liberty side mount is such an amazing little unit. Like if you get that thing dialed in, it's literally just like a aluminum 80
A stage bottle, yeah.
Yeah, it's super nice. And then the fact that you can change it to a back mount or a side mount was super appealing. But then another reason kind of too why I ended up going, so I went with the Fathom Gemini.
Nice.
Another reason too is I liked the fact that it was an MCCR, so I felt that, granted, unless the thing breaks in half, I feel like most of the things I'm like, okay, if I'm out here, I could probably get
You
it
can fix
sorted
yourself,
and fix it, as opposed to having to send it all the way back to Florida, or a Liberty was that in I know somewhere in Europe. I know they make them. I don't know exactly where, but
Czech Republic.
yeah. So, and then some other units, a lot of places in Europe, a few places in the States. So I was like, okay, I'll end up going with and I'm super happy with the Gemini. I
Yeah.
definitely can't complain. And, I think it's one of those things, though, I just spent a lot of money, so I'm not going to say I'm unhappy, right?
Well, look, I think so. Ken Salad, who is great cave instructor I've had, he said I talk about CCRs with him, and he's just like, look, every unit, there's good things, there's bad things, and they're all sort of have their place, and he can tell you the good, bad, and ugly about every single unit, and and I think that's just how it is, and that's fine, right?
Yeah, no, I hear. Actually, that's funny. It always brings me back to an instructor that I chat with quite a bit. A guy, he teaches the Revos, Mark Crane, out of he lives in Bali, and he tells me his kind of famous saying is, he's like, if you can show me a perfect rebreather, he's like, literally, I'll go show you the burning bush of, whatever right now. He's show me the perfect breather, and we'll walk right over there, and I'll show you that burning bush.
Yeah.
But no, man, that's awesome. Well, dude, I absolutely appreciate you coming onto the podcast. I just have one last question for you before I let you go. So, you being somebody that kind of started getting into diving a little bit later, and I feel the same way. I think 33, 34 when I got into diving. People, we get older, we kind of get stuck in our ways. Like, no, I don't want to go try something new. Somebody that's a little bit older is that thinking about trying diving. What's the best piece of advice that you could give to that person?
I mean, I don't know that the advice would be different. Things I would say are diversify the instructor, right? Make sure you find different instructors to learn from. Don't just kind of only isolate yourself to a single kind of point of view. Be really open-minded. Consume as much knowledge as you can about the topic, and diversify your experience in diving. So I see a lot of people, they'll just dive the same quarry every weekend. I was always kind of looking for a different dive, like something that would, allow me to become a more well-rounded diver. And also go slow. I think the industry is geared to take course after course after course. That doesn't necessarily make you a better diver if you can do that. But, I think sometimes, taking the longer road is actually the faster road in this sport. So, and I don't think that those, as I said, I don't think that advice is advice that is anything to do with age necessarily. I think all divers need to do that. And I tell that to all my students, and I'll encourage them to go take a class from. I had a student who I had for open water, and I not for open water, for a some specialty class, I forget which, and he was like, oh, I want to do this class with you, and I'm like, dude, go take fundies, man. So I mean, I'll tell my students to learn from other people and get out of the quarry, go dive in Lake Michigan, go do a river dive, go do all these other things, because it's all great, and that diversity experience makes you a better diver.
Oh no, I completely agree. Especially, you take I always used to kind of joke around and say, like, I'd take a deep Lake Travis diver, somebody that can handle themselves in the deep, dark areas of Lake Travis, low visibility, over a clear blue water diver any day of the week, because they're going to be able to handle themselves different. But you go to some of those oceans and you catch a ripping current, that'll
oh yeah, it'll shake your ass. Yeah. Yeah, and even even with the cave diving stuff, I was getting very used to diving in Mexico, and then last week or so ago, I was royally getting my ass handed to me in Little River, right? And and that's just how it is, man. So it's all different kind of experiences, and they all kind of shape you and make you better.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, Richard, I absolutely appreciate you coming onto the podcast today. This has been absolutely wonderful. I will definitely have to take you up on that trip at some point and come out
seriously.
and visit.
Yeah, do it.
No, I
Next
will.
Summer. Straits of Mackinac. You and me. Let's go.
Let's get it done, man. That would be awesome. We'll drink some coffee on the way. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
My delight. Thank you so much, Nick.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.